Travis Walton, a 26-year-old logger from Fort Wayne, Indiana, was working in the timber industry in the small town of Springerville, Arizona. On November 1975, he and his four friends were working in a remote area of the Apache National Forest, 40 miles from the nearest hospital and 70 miles from the nearest jail. But when they did, he was confused, terrified, and claimed he'd been taken aboard a spaceship by aliens. His friends thought he was just messing around, but then they remembered seeing something strange in the sky earlier that day. There were other humans there too, including one woman who seemed to be in charge. They communicated with Travis telepathically, and he learned that they were taking him to another planet, including sticking needles in his arm and injecting him with different substances. They also used instruments to measure his brain waves. But most terrifying of all, they took blood samples from him and tried to remove some of his skin. They claimed this was necessary so that he could adapt to the new planet. Otherwise, if they just set him down there, he would die from exposure or lack of food and water. The woman told Travis that they'd chosen him for special breeding purposes. That's why they were abducting him and other humans across the globe. They released him back into the forest where he'd been taken from. And that's why his friends found him 5 days later. Bug bites and puncture wounds were all over his body. Then Travis agreed to take a polygraph test, which revealed that he was telling the truth about being abducted. So was it a hoax, or did Travis really get abducted by aliens? Confused and scared and covered in insect bites, one researcher suggests that Travis's story was likely inspired by a recent UFO sighting, combined with the fact that his father had died in a car accident, his girlfriend had left him, and he was living in a trailer with his mom. Not exactly the kind of guy who might make up a story about being abducted by aliens. They searched him for weapons, assuming he'd gone crazy and gone on a rampage. But they couldn't find anything. He wasn't the only one. Just before sunset, they'd seen a bright blue beam of light coming from above and hitting Travis. It was like nothing they'd ever seen before. That's up for debate. Travis never went back out into the woods after the alleged abduction, even though his friends insisted he should, at least for the insurance money. He knew something was out there watching him, and he was too terrified to go back. But hey, maybe it was all just a figment of his imagination. After all, he'd been working in extremely hot temperatures, and dehydration can cause hallucinations. What do you think? Let us know in the comments below. As for me, I'm gonna go with real alien abduction. If it was a hoax, how did the polygraph test indicate that he was telling the truth? Sure, you can fake some wounds, but not all of them. Also, there were witnesses to the blue light that hit Travis, and they weren't all close friends of his. So it's a good thing that they all carried guns, because what happened to Travis that day was terrifying. But how had he survived out in the middle of nowhere for 5 whole days? Well, that's where things get a little strange, because according to Travis, while he was out there logging, he'd seen a blue light in the sky. Then they showed Travis the planet he was on. It looked like Earth, except for a few differences. The continents were arranged differently, and there were no signs of life anywhere. Yet somehow they'd brought him there and planned to use him as a breeding tool. It looked like a huge spotlight shining down on him. Then everything went black. And even after 5 days of searching for him, his friends didn't find any trace of what could have happened to him. In fact, it would be 5 days before they found Travis again. And now, 5 days later, here he was standing in front of them, looking confused and scared. When he came to, he was strapped to a table inside a large metallic room. They took Travis to the window and pointed to the sky. He looked up and saw many spaceships outside. One of them looked like a giant silver dollar. The aliens conducted various tests on Travis after 3 days. A local doctor examined Travis and found that his injuries were consistent with the story he told. Well, what's more, in fact, whatever the truth, we may never know for sure, and that's why.